Okay, you guys, first lecture of Unit 5.1. This unit covers chapters 17, 18, and 19, and it covers the years shown here, 1840 to 1860. What this unit does is it returns us back to the timeline in terms of the political history of the United States. We have just taken a break to go over industrial revolution, reform movements, abolition and slavery and things like that. And now we come back into 1840. William Henry Harrison, a Whig, had just won the presidency. And the next 2 decades are going to move America towards a civil war. You're going to see our country really polarize and break apart around the issue of slavery. And not just the issue of slavery, but really the issue of the expansion of slavery. There was much more consensus that slavery was a problem than I think people realize, but the real issue was, would slavery be allowed to expand, and what would that expansion mean for the future of the country? So I've got a quick lecture. I'm putting this together kind of on the fly because of our return to remote learning. So I'm just going to kind of go through this note sheet. I do have some Wikipedia links in there, which I may bounce to. And then in the video, I will attach this Google Doc in the comments so that you could go back and look at it if you need it. So here we go. William Henry Harrison was the first Whig president, but he died right away. And then you get John Tyler. And John Tyler really betrays most of the Whig principles. And so when you get to 1844, the Whigs are going to try to put their standard bearer out there. Henry Clay is going to replace John Tyler as the candidate, and Henry Clay is going to run for president as a Whig in 1844. And he runs against a Democratic dark horse, meaning that he wasn't really on the radar at the beginning of the process, but he emerged late in the process. James K. Polk. James K. Polk was a Democrat from Tennessee. They called him Young Hickory because he was like Andrew Jackson, from the same state, same ideas, but younger. The issue of the election of 1844 all centered around one issue: the annexation of Texas. John Tyler had actually brought this up as he was going out of office. He was looking for an issue that could maybe win him some popularity, and he said, America needs to annex Texas now. And so the issue for 1844 was, are you for annexing Texas or against it? James K. Polk, he was a Southern Democrat. He said, yes, annex Texas. It's a big territory. It could be a state. He would probably have had it be a slave state. Henry Clay from Kentucky, a Whig, says no. It's not that we don't want Texas, but it's not the right time. If we annex Texas now, it's going to ignite a slave controversy. So Polk said, yes, do it. Henry Clay said no. Really what is emerging is this idea of manifest destiny. Are we going to be a country that expands from coast to coast, from sea to shining sea? James K. Polk was definitely an expansionist, and he was definitely in favor of manifest destiny. Henry Clay, a Westerner, he liked expansion, but approached it with caution. The only other thing that I've put in these notes is this idea of the sectional balance. And remember, we talked about that with the Missouri Compromise. It was very important in terms of policy making that no one side of the argument got too strong in the Senate. Every Senate gets 2 senators, or every state gets 2 senators. And so they wanted the free states and the slave states to be in balance. And there was concern with Texas that it would begin to tip the scale towards the slave states. Long story short, James K. Polk is going to win the election of 1844, and he's going to begin one of the more remarkable presidencies in U.S. history. I say remarkable, not necessarily praiseworthy. There's definitely going to be some flaws here. But James K. Polk, he is going to serve 1 term, from 1845 to 1849, and he's got 4 big goals, and I've listed them here with one of our memory devices, COIL. He wanted to add California. He wanted to settle the Oregon boundary dispute with Great Britain. He wanted to reestablish an independent treasury, and he wanted to lower the tariff. Long story short, he accomplishes all 4 of those goals in one term and then decides not to run again. That's what's remarkable about James K. Polk. He had an agenda. He came in 4 years, did it, and got out. He's also remarkable because he's got a pretty sweet mullet. Pull him up here on Wikipedia. Right there you go. I think he's the first president with hair like that, and that is certainly remarkable. What's also crazy, I told you that he served that one term and then got out. Let's look at this. He got out of office in March of 1849, and he dies just a few months later. Like literally, the office of the presidency took such a toll on him physically that he was only out of office for a couple months, and then he passed away. So crazy story about James K. Polk. As far as these 4 goals, the one that I'm going to focus on today is California, because that's the one that's going to set us up for the Mexican-American War. So let's keep going and look at this. To get California, after Polk becomes president, we annex Texas, and his next goal is to add California. And he sends a guy named, I believe, John Slidell to Mexico, and he offers to buy California for $25 million. That's a lot of money. Remember, the Louisiana Purchase, 40 years earlier, cost $15 million, and we got a lot more land. So $25 million for California. But Mexico says no. Polk is upset, and the next thing he does is he, quote, manufactures a war. When we annex Texas, we inherit a boundary dispute with Mexico. James K. Polk is going to use this boundary dispute to engineer a war. Let me show you what I mean. Let's click on this link. This link takes you to the Mexican-American War. You can read all about it, but it specifically goes to this part of the article. Look here. Here is Texas, and here is the southwestern border of Texas, or at least what the United States and Texas claimed, the Rio Grande River here. We said this was the southwestern border, but Mexico said, no, it was in fact this river, the Nueces River. And so this little green area here is disputed territory. America says it is ours. Mexico says it is theirs. What James K. Polk does is he sends American troops into this disputed territory right up to the river. From Mexico's vantage point, they've been invaded. From our vantage point, we are only defending our boundary. Mexico fights back, and the phrase becomes American blood was spilled on American soil. James K. Polk uses that to get a declaration of war. And sure enough, Congress does declare war. And in 1846, we go to war with Mexico. A key term, Abraham Lincoln's spot resolutions. Abraham Lincoln was a Whig congressman during this time, and he called the president out. Abraham Lincoln was new. He had just got elected, and he calls out the president on the floor of Congress and says, show me the spot on a map where American blood was spilled. These are called the spot resolutions. The president never responds to Lincoln. Lincoln gets voted out of office after just 2 years. And it'll be a long time before we see Lincoln really come back on the stage. But that was, kind of Lincoln's first trip to Washington. He calls out the president and then almost immediately gets sent home. The Mexican-American War, I'm not going to go into the details. Again, you can go back to this Wikipedia page or your textbook and read about some of the generals and the battles. There are cool things in there from a military standpoint. But America's going to win pretty easily. Public opinion is very divided. Generally, Democrats are for and Whigs are against. The irony is the best generals in the war were Whigs. Zachary Taylor, his nickname was Old Rough and Ready, and Winfield Scott, his nickname was Old Fuss and Feathers. These are the lead generals in the war, but they're both of a Whig ideology. After the war, when Polk doesn't run again, Zachary Taylor is going to become president, and then Winfield Scott will be the Whig candidate for president in 1852. So these Whig generals who wage a good war in terms of success are going to play that into political prominence. Here's where it gets interesting. At the end of the war, a U.S. diplomat, Nicholas Trist, he's going to negotiate the treaty to end the Mexican-American War. It's called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. From the United States perspective, this is an excellent treaty. It ends the war, and we gain a ton of land. It's called the Mexican Cession. Today, that territory makes up California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Nevada, and Utah. So basically, from the Mexican-American War, we take, or Mexico cedes to us the entire American Southwest. We end up paying $15 million indemnity to Mexico for that land and for the war. Again, go back to the beginning. We offered to buy California for $25 million. After the war, we take so much more than California for a mere $15 million, plus the cost of the war. But still, a very good treaty in terms of aggrandizement for the United States. Morally, obviously, we have issues that we have to work through. However, what's interesting is Nicholas Trist was slow in getting this treaty done. By the time the war was ending, we had had such military success in Mexico that many Democrats said that we could take all of Mexico. In fact, James K. Polk recalls Trist. I'll show you Trist. He looks like this. He's got a good set of hair and a good beard as well. Close friend of Thomas Jefferson, and was at his bedside when Jefferson died. And you can read all about how he negotiated this treaty. But he was so slow in getting this treaty that Polk says, "Come home, you're recalled." And Trist disobeys orders, stays in Mexico to get this treaty, and brings it back and puts it on Polk's desk. Now Polk has to decide, do I sign this really good treaty, which is more than what we wanted, but it may upset people who wanted us to take all of Mexico. Thankfully, the war didn't continue. America was not more greedy, and Polk signs off on the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So the final point of all of this, and this is where chapter 17 transitions into chapter 18, is, so will slavery be allowed to expand into all of these territories, this Mexican cession? These areas fall outside the Missouri Compromise. Okay, so the question was, would slavery be allowed to expand into this territory? And it wasn't a question that just came up after the war. The question of would slavery be allowed to expand was actually into territories gained from the Mexican-American War, was actually tackled during the war, something called the Wilmot Proviso. David Wilmot from Pennsylvania, he put this amendment that said we're only going to pay for the war, an appropriations bill, if there's a commitment that slavery will not be allowed to expand once the war is over. This proviso, this amendment, was never approved during the Mexican-American War. That's why the issue lingers after. But it foreshadowed and showed, hey, the expansion of slavery is going to be a big issue. It does become an issue in 1850. Essentially what happened was the California gold rush. People flooded into California because of the discovery of gold, and California came up for statehood much sooner than anybody expected in 1850. And so the politicians got together, and our guy Henry Clay in 1850, this is one of the last things he does, his last hurrah. He comes in and he says, hey, let's put together a compromise that answers whether slavery will be allowed to expand, and makes people happy on all sides. Your acronym to memorize the Compromise of 1850 is POPFAC. POPFAC. And these are the provisions. Some of these are fairly neutral. Some of these favor Southern slave states. Some of them favor Northern free states. But these are the 4 points. You can click on it here and read it. The catch was Henry Clay bundled all of these compromises together and tried to get them passed through Congress. It didn't work. Henry Clay left, and he was dejected. His plan didn't work. But then Stephen Douglas from Illinois picks up the pieces of Henry Clay's broken bill and gets each one passed separately, individually. He said, we couldn't get enough people in Congress to agree on all of these, but we could get a majority formed to approve each one separately, by kind of bartering and trading political opinions and favors. Stephen Douglas gets it through Congress in 1850. Zachary Taylor, the president, probably would have vetoed it, but then he died. The second Whig president elected also dies early in office. His successor, Millard Fillmore, will step in and sign off on it. The Compromise of 1850 was thought to answer the slavery question and the expansion of slavery question, but it only lasts about 10 years. It actually breaks down just a few years later in the areas of Kansas and Nebraska. We'll talk more about those in chapters 18 and 19. I should have another lecture on those coming up, but this runs you through at least chapter 17 and some of chapter 18. Feel free to leave questions in the comments and let me know if there's something that you want me to go back over. Thanks for watching, you guys.